man in a trench coat in the dark. A woman's lost a kid sleeping in the park. Rag suits, daggers, Park Avenue. Everybody wants to talk to you about just some BS of there. Just some BS. Just some BS of yours. Just some BS. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS of ours.
The thing is, if we do get hookers, I mean, it sounds like the natural progression. You get your microphone, then you get your sort of headphones, then you get your round table, you get a red sofa or a black sofa for homage. And then you get soundproof walls, you get a mixer, etc. Then you get the hookers, and then you get the website, and it's like a natural progression of things. It's just the stuff you do. The problem is it would be really awkward because I'm really awkward in any sort of hooker or striptease or any kind of scenario.
I could see you being very awkward at a strip club. I think that would be very fun to see how you react at a strip club. Because first off, you're a germaphobe.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, no matter how much they wipe down that pole, they're not getting it clean. They've just been grinding up on some dude's crotch, and then all of a sudden they're coming up to you asking for sweaty pounds. I've been to 2 strip clubs in this country, and the oddest thing I ever saw was, because at least in the U.S. you have dollar bills, so you just hand them $1 or you stick $1 into their T-shirt.
Here you have pound coins.
Yes, I saw people actually tossing pound coins onto a stage as a girl was dancing. And I just thought, this might be this could be, yes, this is absolutely the most degrading thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah. And then she's over there wearing literally nothing, bent over, picking these little pound coins up and putting them into this purse that must have weighed about fucking 20 kilos.
Hoover, get a mini Hoover.
Oh God,
Yeah, I've been to 2 strip clubs in my life, only one in this country, but there it was at least. I'm not going to say civilized. I'm going to say they had a lady before each sort, because it had like a rota where every 20 minutes someone else was dancing, and at the sort of switch off there was a lady who walked around with effectively a bucket asking people, it's £2 or something to stay on, so they dropped it into the bucket and then they, I assume, gave it to the lady or the proprietor of the club, and then he gave the lady her 10% share or whatever it was.
See, in a past life I worked for CBS Radio, and my biggest overnight client, who used to give me about $30,000 per month to run overnight ads and then I do promotions for him, was a strip club in San Diego called Cheetahs, and the owner of said strip club was allegedly mob-tied. And I'll say allegedly because it wasn't proven. But what would happen is I would go into Cheetahs, usually during the day, and I'd walk out with a brown paper bag of cash because he didn't like to do business any other way.
Right.
And so it would be a brown paper bag filled with cash. And he'd band it and do everything else, but it'd be $30,000 in $100 bills in a brown paper bag in cash. So this went on for about 6 months. I'd take it right to the office. The office would then process it, put it in the bank. We'd run the ads. Totally fine. 6th month comes up. I'm walking out. 2 random guys in suits walk up to me. Sir, I'd like to ask you what's in the bag. None of your fucking business. FBI badges come out. $30,000 in cash, sir. We're going to have to ask you to come with us, please. Okay. To where I go to the San Diego headquarters for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I'm questioned for about 6.5 hours.
What would they ask you for that long?
Well, because they kept trying to see whether or not I had criminal ties with them, because they were trying to get them for the RICO Act, because they had used Nextel phones. I don't know if Nextels were ever here, but what you could do is you could do a click to connect. So it was like a walkie-talkie feature.
Right.
So it was like sending a WhatsApp message, but you do it via voice. You didn't have to pay extra for it.
Yeah.
Well, what it did is that walkie-talkie feature bounced off of different towers, and by doing so, sometimes they were in a different state. Don't ask me how. And so they were trying to get them for the RICO Act as far as interstate commerce, breaking interstate commerce laws, which automatically opens up for the RICO Act, which means the U.S. government can then seize all of your assets. Off that $30,000, I probably made about making 10%, so I was making $3,000 a month off of his adverts that I was running overnights, and then I would bring on-air talent up there to sit and then talk about their time on lunch. I had a mid-morning show. This guy's Dave and Jeff. They actually run a podcast, the Dave and Jeff Show. So if you're listening, fantastic show. Shout out to Jeff Dossett and Dave Palais. And I would get them hammered drunk once a week, and I'd bring them to the strip club because I just wanted them to get divorced. I was just focusing. Because I'd have a limo, pick them up from their house, take them to the studio, get them hammered drunk, then take them to the strip club, continue to get them hammered drunk, and then take them home. And the amount of time that poor fucking Dave Palais's wife was just completely and utterly upset with me getting her freaking husband completely shit-faced hammered.
I can see why she would,
He'd come home stinking like vanilla lotion with glitter all over him and hammered as fuck. Yeah.
In all fairness, as I say, I've always admired people who enjoy strip clubs.
To me, the biggest thing is the whole being teased thing. It's not really my deal. I've dated a few girls that worked at that specific strip club because you're in there during the day, so you talk to them like normal human beings because they're not, basically shilling for cash at that time. They're just hanging out because they're like, I got regulars that'll come in and they'll tip me out enough to where I'm fine. I don't have to worry about it. So you'd be able to have an actual conversation with these girls. And then we did a couple of events where I brought the girls out. The more time you spend with them, you realize that they're not just girls that get up there and show their, hoo-hoo. Some of them are actually, really going to school and really getting an education, and they're really doing that because they can work 3 days a week, make enough money to pay their tuition and do that. So it was like the cliche, oh, she's paying her way through school. No, I knew other girls that just were the greatest thing for local economy because a stripper is the best thing for a local economy. They deal in cash. They always buy new shit. They always buy the newest cars, newest gadgets, newest TVs. They always spend their money. Stripper, for the most part, bear in mind, it's being very generalized, they're not savers. You don't see them with 401ks or IRAs. They're, spending that money.
Taking notes, Philip Hammond? In terms of post-Brexit recovery of the economy?
Welcome back to an all-new episode of the Just Some BS podcast.
This economy has never sounded so great in my ears.
Once again, welcome back to the Just Some BS podcast. I am your host along this wild and crazy journey, the American Nick, joined as always by...
First I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong, that I grew strong, and I learned how to get along, and so you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon you.
the beer doctor himself, Radovan. Beer doctor, you're back, huh?
Yeah, it's just I was going to play a different song, and then in the pre-episode chat, you mentioned that you will survive because Nick somehow misunderstood the very principles of economy. Where he sort of had a bad day because his employers actually just paid him what they owed him rather than going overboard and paying him for 3 times as much as what he actually did. And he said, but I'll be all right, I'll survive. And I thought, well, I know the perfect song for you.
All right. If you'd like to contribute to that fun, feel free to find us on Patreon, patreon.com/JSBSpod. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/JSBSpod. Find us on Twitter @JSBSpod and Instagram, JSBSpod. Be sure to go over to the website, jspspod.com, to leave your comments, questions, or just to do whatever you'd like to do on the website. And feel free to email Shetland Pony Photos to jsbspod@gmail.com.
And that's unfortunately all time we have. This episode. We were glad you joined us, and see you next time.
Yeah, it's been real and fun, and that's roughly 3 minutes of your life you're never going to get back.
It's difficult, because I'll put a simple question to you. Casper the ghost,
the friendly ghost.
If you believe the propaganda, fine. Casper the...
Wait, the propaganda. Who was it that put on this propaganda that you talk of? Warner Brothers, or I don't even know. Wait, no.
Look, mate. If you have child labor in Cambodia making replica sheets for 30 cents a day, and then you sell them off in America at Disneyland or whatever, then you know you've got some skeletons in your closet, and not because you're a ghost.
Disney? What are you talking about? Do you even know what Casper the Ghost is?
I have no idea, but. My point is, Casper the Ghost, how many successful podcast shows did Casper the Ghost participate in?
But probably none.
Yeah, exactly. Why? Because he's not real. He's a ghost. And you and I, unfortunately, Nick, according to the United Kingdom Home Secretary, are not real people.
So does that mean that... Okay, so there's a place in Yosemite National Forest that's called the Dead Zone, or the Murder Zone, where you can actually kill somebody legally. You can actually go to this area and murder somebody, and there is no... It's not illegal in any way, shape, or form.
How? Isn't murder a federal offense?
Because... here's the great thing. So, it's a part of Idaho, but it's technically not part of Idaho. And it's not actually a part of Wyoming either.
Well, I don't blame it, but I mean...
It's this chunk of land that's carved out. I will, if I remember, I will grab the picture of it. I was reading about it just the other day because it came back out in the news because this is the dead zone and all these missing 411 people are dying there. And there's nothing really that can be done because it's not federally regulated and there's no state or local authority that actually governs that area. So it's like...
what's its legal status?
It's nowhere land.
Is it still part of the United States?
Technically, no.
But how? I mean...
That's just it. Nobody can figure out why, because it doesn't land in any jurisdiction.
So, if there's people being murdered there legally, why doesn't the government just invade?
I don't know. I don't know why they don't change the boundaries. They don't do this, they don't do that. I mean, it's a national park, so there are some things that you can't do because it's federally mandated that you can't do this and that.
So it's federal land, then?
It is, but it isn't. It's kind of like a sovereign nation. It's almost like Indian. Sorry, not Indian, dot or feather. Native land. So you can do whatever the fuck you want to.
You should move there. I mean, how many people have been murdered there?
Well, here's the thing. So, National Forest Service doesn't release numbers of missing or dead, ever.
Right. I see.
And there's a reasoning why. The reason they say they don't do it is because none of the National Forest Services actually talk to each other. So, apparently, if you go missing in, say, Yosemite, like Camilla and I did on our hike, and we're gone for 14 hours and somehow survived, if that does occur, and we had never been, like, found or didn't survive, we wouldn't actually have been missing. We would fail to exist.
Fair enough. I'm hungry.
Oh, Jesus. Alrighty. Okay, so why is it that we don't exist as far as...
Hold on. What made you think of this place?
Because you said...
can't just tell me there's a place where you know...
Well, you had mentioned that we don't exist, so that's what made me think about it.
Well, no, I didn't say we don't exist, but we're a bit like Casper, as in not real people.
So what are we then?
I don't know. She didn't offer an explanation. She just told us we're not real people. But I guess that I need to clarify the legal status of what this means, because have you heard of a service called WhatsApp?
Briefly.
Yeah, because I understand that you have long-term brain damage as a result of your rampant alcoholism and years, decades spent wearing spandex, which restricted circulation to your brain, but we use it to communicate with each other.
Okay.
And the thing with WhatsApp is it employs end-to-end encryption, which for those who do not know what that is, get off the internet. Because it's kind of as important that whatever you send, no one can read apart from the person you send it to.
Yes.
And Amber Rudd this week has issued a statement saying that real people don't need end-to-end encryption. She said, real people often prefer ease of use and multitude of features to perfect unbreakable security. Who uses WhatsApp because it is end-to-end encrypted rather than because it is incredibly user-friendly and a cheap way of staying in touch with friends and families? Companies are constantly making trade-offs between security and usability, and it is here where our experts believe opportunities may lie.
Wait, I use Signal and Telegraph specifically because the encryption's even better than WhatsApp.
Yeah, but you're a fake person.
No, because nobody needs to know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm not doing anything shady, but why the fuck should you know? It's bad enough the NSA already listens to this podcast. It'd be one thing if they actually rated and reviewed on iTunes. Feel free to do so.
To Patreon.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are already listening, so you might as well actually step up and give a little something.
Yeah, here's a challenge to NSA. If you donate on Patreon, we'll raise the production standard and content standard of this podcast. So listening won't be as tedious as you know. Or send us suggestions as well.
I'm guessing there's probably a guy that's listening that's going like this, going, fuck, I'm just going to put $20 in per month because I want them to talk about something other than, you know, bowel movements and...
when did we
Ren, you've talked bowel movements on multiple occasions.
What's wrong with bowel movements?
We don't talk about
we all have bowel movements.
Yes, we do, but we don't talk about it.
But yeah, so it's,
Okay.
yeah, WhatsApp is successful because it's user friendly, not because there are quite possibly dozens, if not hundreds, of WhatsApp alternatives. It's just people use WhatsApp because they trust it, and part of the reason why they trust it is because it's end-to-end encrypted. I see her point. It's an awful point, though.
It's kind of a to me it sounds like, well, you can get around, you don't need to do that. What you should be doing is you should just be using whatever service that we think, because that's how we stop terrorism. I just think that she has this... Look, I have a kid that works for me, and I didn't...
Child labor.
Well, he's young. He's like 24.
Right.
But I'm actually in the process of turning him into an account manager for the agency that I run. And I didn't... I had white privilege in my thought process. Because he is Muslim, he's got a beard, and he lives in the area where the acid attacks are taking place here in London.
London.
Yeah, well... Right around the corner from his house is where a couple of...
It's probably not even Muslim. It's probably some poor guy who lives in Flatcher, and you see a beard, it must be Muslim.
No, he is Muslim. We've discussed it. But his fear is, because his mom's a translator and she's always going around the city, she's afraid that some idiot that's doing these acid attacks on Muslims now is going to actually do it on him.
For those who don't know, because, you know, we have an international audience.
Very true.
One of the things, hi Cletus, one of the things that is currently happening in London for some weird, inexplicable reasons, because you have them sporadically for years, is people basically walking around with, you know, one of those spray bottle thingies you use to clean surfaces. They fill them with acid and just spray people in the face, run around on mopeds and just do that. Have acid in balloons and that sort of thing. It's a bizarre crime space, and the reason they're doing it is that the punishments for it are reasonably low. Say, you know, if you carry around a knife, you can go to prison for years, even though if you haven't used it, it's part of the, you know, government's attempt to tackle knife crime. This is such a bizarre thing that it's not legislated for, so gangs use this. Generally, it's either been used in very, very sporadic cases or gang on gang. Now it's kind of spread, and normal people seem to be targeted for no other reason than, say, the color of their skin, white or brown or whatever. So yeah,
it's a horrific type thing. So the more that I talked to him, it really made me realize that fundamentally I am not a real person because Amber Rudd said so. But I am at least white enough that certain things aren't going to affect me and I won't have to deal with them. Mm-hmm. And it really did make me stop to question certain things. Actually, one of my clients is right by our old office, the old Perfect Pint office at E1.
Brick Lane.
Mm. And so I was walking down the street and I'm like, oh, this is where my old office used to be. And then we went by the Pride, didn't get a beer because, well... It's a real job, so going for a pint or a half at lunch is not really something you could do in a real job on for a company that is actually looking to function and continue working on.
My favorite perfect pint memory was a fire alarm drill at 11 a.m. We're standing outside the building. We look at each other. Pride?
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah, pride. So we stayed in the pub until about 6 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then yeah. Rush hour is much more fun when completely obliterated.
Funniest thing, I get home and Camilla actually had the day off, and she looks at me, she goes, "Are you drunk?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Were you at work?" I was all, "For part of the day," and then there was a fire alarm, and she goes, "And so that meant you go to the pub and get hammered?" "Yeah. Why?" Radovan looked at me and said the Pride, and I said yes, and then Murphin said yes, and then we all just went. Yeah. She goes, "Is it a real job?" I don't know, they pay me. That's all I know.
Yeah, it's you found the dream job where you get home sober and your significant other asks you, "Were you at work today? Because you look sober."
Okay. Well, it's funny that we talk about beer. And lately it seems like a reoccurring thing that our former friends over at Brewdog make news. And
Brewdog, for those who don't know, is the brewing extension of Wall Street.
Yeah, well, they haven't quite got corporate sellout cherry flavored vanilla pilsner ready to go yet, but they are making waves. And to do so, Brewdog has announced plans to open a new craft beer bar that will straddle the border of U.S. and Mexico.
Oh, I've read about this.
Named the Bar on the Edge and situated in a remote location, the bar reflects the Scottish brewery's intention to expand to the farthest reaches of the United States. Its controversial positioning makes a physical statement about collaboration and inclusivity, which has always been the cornerstones of the brewer's identity. With the specific location still top secret, Brewdog has only revealed that half of it will be in Texas and the other half in Tijuana, Mexico.
How can this legally work? I mean, they're going to have a wall running through their bar?
Well, here's the thing. So, across the U.S.-Mexico border in certain places, especially in Texas, because for those of you that don't know, Texas is fucking big. Okay? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of areas along the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas. There's nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, it's a little known fact. Texas is actually the size of Texas.
Yeah, everything's bigger in Texas. So I guess they're built from old shopping containers. The construction would officially be defined as a temporary mobile building that will serve Mexico beer on the U.S. side and U.S. beers on the Mexico side, as well as bring Brewdog's range of craft beers brewed in Columbus, Ohio. The announcement will be celebrated with a Tex-Mex craft beer event at the brewery's Dog Tap Room in Columbus, Ohio this weekend. This Tex-Mex tap takeover will feature beers from Texan breweries Alamo Beer Company, Brash Brewing, No Label Brewing, 512 Brewing, Copperhead Brewing, and Buffalo Bio, alongside craft beer cocktails with Mexican mezcal and tequila. Now, Brewdog has always been one to be make beer, not walls, is what's supposedly going to be painted on this thing. Brewdog is always one to do things strictly to get publicity out of it.
Oh.
Yes, and so I believe this is just a publicity hype to get more people to go to the tap room.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that strangely seemed to be a PR announcement for their tap room than anything else.
Yeah, so to be completely honest, if it's where I think it might be out there, no one's going to. Who the fuck's gonna go there? And let's be honest, because you're not crossing the border, you don't have the money to buy beer. And the last thing you're thinking of buying when crossing the border is beer. You're thinking about buying water or food.
If anything, it's going to discuss. Say, I am a Mexican refugee or immigrant or whatever you want to call it. Migrant. You're sort of been crossing the desert for days. you're reaching the American border, and you see a brew pub. Now, if I was that Mexican sort of migrant, I'd look at that and go, I'm going fucking crazy.
It's a mirage.
It's a mirage. I need to turn around. This isn't possible. So, in a way, it could be a psychological wall they're building.
Well,
I mean, you know,
it could have Trump's backing. You don't know.
I mean, you know, President Peña Nieto. Have you read them?
No.
So for those who don't know, this week also, and I'm normally you're the one who brings up Mr. Trump, and and I apologize for doing it on in this instance, but it's actually I quite like the weird insights into the world of politics you don't normally see. You know, like the Cablegate leaks of last decade. I mean, I must have read through so many of those because it was just interesting to see what diplomats talk about and the reports they get, etc. So there were two conversations of President Trump's over the phone in the days following his inauguration that have been leaked somehow to the press. One is with the Mexican President Peña Nieto, or to say it in my Spanish accent, President Peña Nieto, and the other was with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. They talk. They're both brilliant.
I read through a bit of the Turnbull one.
The one with Mr. Nieto is Mr. Nieto talks about a virtual wall. Well, Mr. Trump talks about a physical wall. Mr. Nieto talks about a virtual wall, which basically saying, look, if Mexicans weren't, you know, like fighting each other and drug addicted and not doing that well economically, there would be no reason for them to come to the States. So, you know, his idea of a virtual wall is to bridge the gap in terms of economic disparity, which, in all fairness, Mr. Trump is trying to do, though perhaps not necessarily by elevating Mexico. But kudos, you know, he's still trying to achieve peace and you know, prosperity for well, perhaps not prosperity, but equality of situations.
No equality at all.
But you know, the Brewdog alternative is a new, the psychological wall where people approach the border and think this is just batshit insane and turn around. You know,
they go, Americans are crazy.
But I still would encourage people who with an interest in stuff to read these conversations, because the one with President Nieto, which is almost an hour long, it's I'll put it this way. For those of you who have enjoyed Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, or generally enjoyed the genre of fantastic realism, it's like that world clashes with Hemingway. It's like a writer-off. And I never thought I wanted to read a writer-off between Hemingway and Marquez, but it's like that. I mean, President Trump in this scenario is the Hemingway, very to the point, brash, insensitive, chauvinistic, bigging himself up as he is prone to do. And then President Nieto, it's the way he speaks. It's just fantastic.
He's very eloquent.
I wouldn't go that far, but he's very unnecessary in the way he talks, and I really like it because you could just say, "Look, President Trump, we don't fancy paying for the wall," and he says that.
Yeah.
But in a 20-minute monologue. Where he talks about, you know, flowers and sunshines and prosperity and respect and two countries, a historic bond. But all he says in that monologue is, we don't want to pay for the wall. Whilst, you know, President Marquez goes on this monologue, and then Mr. Trump comes back with, you got beautiful words, you're paying for the wall. But it's also you know, just this. It's lovely, and then it illustrates the same point as the one with Malcolm Turnbull, which is a different type of conversations. They're talking again, and that one is probably the better one to read because, well, you know, I'm not a big fan of Marquez personally. But the other one is just, I think, it highlights the fundamental misunderstanding between what the political and the popular divide of the perception of politics, where the political class, people who have been involved in politics for generations, who live and breathe politics, don't quite understand what is going on at the moment. With the rise of President Trump, with Brexit, etc., they just, you know, it's been a shell-shocked few years where it's like, what the fuck is going on? We're giving them what they want. Why are they sort of doing this to us?
Yes.
And it's beautiful because they're talking about a deal President Obama signed with Australia. Australia has a problem. It had lots of migrants, refugees coming via boat to Australia. A lot of these boats sank. They were the sort of the preferred route of choice for human traffickers, smugglers, etc. So what Australia said is no more people via boat. Anyone who arrives via boat gets sent to 2 refugee camps in Nauru, which has its own wonderful history, which we'll cover at some point in 2020. And the other one I forget. Hugely controversial move by Australia, but their argument was, look, we don't mind people coming in, we have official routes through which we accept refugees, just no one arrives by boat.
Yeah.
And the point by very harsh enforcement of this rule was to discourage the human traffickers and to discourage the smugglers. Look, you can try, but we're not letting anyone in, and therefore we kill off your business because no one will want to use your services.
Yes.
Now, the deal struck with the United States was that obviously you can't keep these people in those refugee camps forever.
Yes.
So the idea was that every year the US vets these refugees on these islands and can voluntarily choose to bring between 1,250 to 2,000 refugees to the United States. Only those that have been vetted, and they said these are productive refugees. Most of these are economic migrants. They're not fleeing war, they want a better life. The US takes a certain amount every year, and as a reciprocal arrangement, Australia then takes some of US refugees. So basically the Australian point is, we're still happy to welcome refugees, we're just not, we don't want to take the ones from the boat. So if the US takes our boat refugees, we take some of theirs.
Yeah.
Not quite sure what the entire point of this, because the boat refugees still get to go to the United States, which to some is probably a better destination than Australia. I mean, not everyone fancies drinking koala blood every Sunday. The prisoners, they probably do stuff like that.
What the fuck is wrong with you? Drink koala blood.
But isn't that what Foster's is? Koala pee.
And there goes our Foster sponsorship.
Koala pee.
There goes our Foster sponsorship.
Anyway.
If you are a beer company and you'd like to sponsor this podcast, feel free to send an email to jsbspod@gmail.com, and you will get Radovan doing a live read of a spot for you where he will not call your beer koala urine or blood or anything of that nature.
Yeah. So this is the factual basis of this conversation. And it is utterly fascinating that for the 20 minutes it lasted, Donald Trump is saying, we're not doing this. This is shit. We don't want 2,000 unvetted. And then at some point in the conversation, it jumps to 5,000 unvetted refugees coming into the United States at a time when this was the first travel ban he issued. And Trump is saying, we need to cancel this deal, otherwise we're not talking. This is shit. I'm not doing this. I'm the world's greatest person at not letting people into the country. That's a quote. So the actual quote is, "I am the world's greatest person that does not want to let people into the country." Grammatically, it doesn't even quite make sense, but
I'm starting to look. For the longest time now, people have said he's a 70-year-old man who's going senile, and he's a bit batshit crazy. Now, he ran his campaign on having endurance, and during his first trip across Europe, he had to take a 2-day break because he was tired. He's now not even a full 6 months in, and he's on a 17-day vacation because, well,
we'll get to that. Let me just finish this. I'm almost done. So this is Mr. Trump, and the actual... I'm going to read this passage, because it sums up the conversation perfectly. Malcolm, why is this so important? I do not understand. This is Mr. Trump. Let me do the Trump and the Australian accent.
Okay, perfect.
Malcolm, why is this so important? I don't understand. This is going to kill me. I am the world's greatest person that does not want to let people into the country. And now I'm agreeing to take 2,000 people, and I agree I can vet them. But that puts me in a bad position. It makes me look so bad, and I have only been here a week. Mr. Turnbull, I'm going to do my Australian accent just to differentiate. With great respect, that is not right. It is not 2,000. Trump. Well, it is close. I have also heard like 5,000 as well. Well, it is close. I have also heard like 5,000 as well. And the entire point... So this is Mr. Trump's whole sort of thing. And throughout the entire conversation, Mr. Turnbull tries to say, this is not how it works. It's you can vet all of them and you can take none. And this is the big part of the deal. The US can say, we'll take none of them.
We vetted them and we think they're not fit and proper and we won't take any.
And Mr. Turnbull tries to explain this to him. He's like, look, if you have your travel ban, all you can say, we're not, as part of this deal, we're not accepting any migrants. He's feeding him lines. And Trump says, it doesn't matter what it is. It's how it looks. And this is the fundamental difference between, from... This is Mr. Turnbull going, what the shit? This is perfectly, clear. You don't have to take it. And Trump asks, if I don't have to take it, how does that work? And Turnbull replies, this entire deal is just based on good faith.
Yeah.
So you vet them, and if you genuinely feel that people, we assume on our end that you're not just going to reject people for ideological reasons, but it's perfectly within your rights to do it. And Trump just doesn't understand this, Mr. Trump. And he just goes, no, it just looks bad. And I don't care what it actually is. It just looks bad. Therefore, I'm not doing it. And it ends. The conversation ends with the wonderful chestnut of Mr. Trump saying, "I have had it. I have been making these calls all day, and this is the most unpleasant call I've had all day. Putin was a pleasant call. This is ridiculous."
I'm okay. So Donnie, Donnie. Anytime your name is mentioned, you have to pay attention to it because you're a narcissistic egomaniac who just can't handle not knowing what people are saying about you. So Donnie, it's time for a heart-to-heart, kid. First off, you're an employee of roughly 300 odd million people. You were elected by 60 absolute fucking morons. 60 million. 100 million people thought there was no fucking way in hell that you could actually be elected president. They were wrong. I blamed them partially for it. I also blame the 60 million people that voted for you. My mother and brother included. My mother and brother, 6 months in, have already turned and went, "Dear God in heaven, what have we done?"
Oi, you voted for Gary Johnson, so
I voted for
you're no less complicit in this.
No, because when it came down to it, I just wanted a third-party option. I wanted a third-party. I believe that the United States needs a third-party option in order for the voice of the people, the centrists, to be heard. And it's just, over the past 2 weeks since we recorded, a lot of interesting things have happened in U.S. politics, whether it's the new immigration bill that they're trying to put forward, the backlash from Trump's tweet about, we're not letting transgenders into the military anymore, and for some reason, both the left and the right don't understand that a tweet is not actual legislation. It doesn't fucking mean anything. It's a goddamn fucking tweet.
Well, this is another beautiful thing. The policy hasn't changed. It's been as it was, and it probably won't change. He just sent a tweet. It's again, people seem to believe that Trump is real. He's not. He's Casper the Ghost, just like us. He floats around and says things, but they don't mean anything.
That's just it. I don't think he realizes, like, he had a big tweet saying, so many people want me to get off social media, but this is the only way for people to hear the truth. the real news. And then his daughter-in-law decided to do a Facebook Live news propaganda show. Oh God, I watched it. It was fucking horrific. I like history. I find history to be fascinating because you get to see that there's a repeat. It's very cyclical. Everything, there's an ebb and flow, but everything fucking comes back. That just does. What was popular at one time comes back. So prior to this onslaught of Trump, say probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was watching old Nazi propaganda videos. You could actually see them. And there was the U.S. propaganda. Like, what they would do is they'd put, like, a U.S. spin on what they were saying, and then you'd have an actual German person actually translating it, so you'd get the two different sides of it. So you'd watch it one way, and then you could watch the clip German way. So you'd hear, okay, yeah, they made out the Nazis to be just as bad as they really are, and the Nazis made them out to be not bad at all. So it was fascinating. And I watched this Facebook because I was like, I have to know what the other side is saying, because if I have that staunch mind, look, I don't trust Hillary. I think she is a criminal in so many senses of the word. I don't think she would have been a better candidate. I do think that she's not as bipolar and senile as Donnie is. But the propaganda that is now going out for him is the most ludicrous shit I have ever seen in the history of the world. And we haven't even talked about the mooch. We haven't even talked about the dude that only had a job for 10 days.
No, technically minus 15. He didn't even last until he was officially confirmed.
Exactly. So he was actually, like, Spicer left, and I kind of, like, I felt bad for Spicer. Since day one, I felt bad for Spicer. Because Trump would tweet something, and then Spicer would have to stand in front of people and go, that's not really what he meant. And then Trump would tweet right after he said that's not what he really meant. But that's what I really meant.
But see, this is the thing, and I dread to propose this theory because it could potentially make Mr. Trump extremely popular around the world. But the thing is, I think it is now very clear that there seem to be two separate realities. There is the one, say, Mr. Turnbull lives in, or, you know, the generals of the army live in, where it's what most people would recognize as
reality.
Now, but there's a separate plane
of existence,
Mr. Trump, and you know, and the clue here is that he genuinely, you look into his eyes when he exists, and he generally seems to believe that, you know, the stuff people from, let's call this reality A, talk about is fake. Calls it fake news, fake facts, fake this, fake that. And what he says in his reality B is real. And then people from reality go, that's fake, that's not real. So there are two very separate realities here. Now, the lazy way out is Trump is psychotic and he's crazy. But the level of conviction he has makes me think, and we should know this, because we have an alternative universe podcast.
Yes.
Mr. Trump is from a different dimension. He is from that alternative universe where the shittiest things are the most successful ones.
Okay.
Where we have a podcast with hookers and Mr. Trump attracts audiences of 50,000 people and he's the world's greatest person at so many things. He is an interdimensional traveler. Mr. Trump is Doctor Who. He is the first half fruit, half man. I mean, recently the BBC announced the first female Doctor Who. He's the first half fruit, half man Doctor Who. Now talk about a big step for fruit rights.
Donnie scares me, though. He just does. Because there's a small majority of people who, no matter how... Okay, so you know the story of Jim Jones, right?
The U.S. philanthropist and thought leader,
yes,
who decided to revolt against the marching tide of capitalism and founded a spiritual home in Jonestown, and then was brutally sabotaged through propaganda.
Yes, where the CIA went in and poisoned all those people, and his name was besmirched.
Yeah.
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 So people always wonder how it is that individuals buy into a cult. There's whole organizations out there where people make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year cult breaking. So they go in, they reprogram these people and set them free from the cult. And I'm starting to see, because you get the outliers. My mom and my brother were outliers. They wanted something different. They weren't happy with Obama's plan. They didn't really understand it, but they thought, okay, something's new. They believed the propaganda that Hillary was bad. They couldn't see the advantage of, say, Gary Johnson or, none of the above. Like, they didn't see that. They didn't see the advantage of it. Fast forward 6 months in, and my mom starts to realize from not just reading one set of news sources, because I sent her multiple news sources. Like, it's not a CNN article or a Fox News article or a political article. Like, I'm making it a point so she finds actual news that's real. That's just, here's the numbers, this is what they mean, this is what it does.
Yeah.
And she went, holy shit, fuck. Mom doesn't cuss, and she hates the F word. And we were talking on FaceTime the other day, and she just goes, fuck. And I went, what? And she goes, you were right. I was like, no, I wasn't right. I just didn't get conned. I didn't buy into it. I wasn't part of the cult. I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Yeah, but you were here, so...
I was there when it was going on. I was there for 6 months during the entire election process. I was in the U.S. from Brexit until right before Christmas.
You should stop going to places. Just bad things follow you.
Exactly. Whenever I go somewhere, fucking shit happens. It used to be when I traveled, dead people would die. Like, every time I traveled, I came over here and some people died when I came over for business. I went to Colorado, and while I was in the plane, Michael Jackson died. Good or bad? Probably good. Pedophile.
No, he wasn't.
Non-convicted, alleged pedophile. Alleged.
No.
Alleged pedophile.
I contest that vigorously.
Okay. But I seem to think that there is a large percentage of people out there that are they're so fed up and they're so disillusioned by the constant narrative that goes out on either side, left or right, that a populist candidate, because you're like, this rise of populism and this, as opposed to political, there's this discourse. And I think it was another reason why maybe Macron was voted in, because you saw something completely different that they were like, okay, let's jump into it.
Who for the first time in 3 months since he assumed office is now a negative popularity rating.
Yeah, he's finally there. Because that's what happens. Yeah, I mean, that's just it. You're everybody's cup of tea, and then 2 weeks later, you're not everyone's cup of tea. It just happens. But it's a matter of how you deal with it. Whereas instead of him saying, oh, these are fake polls, this is fake news, this is fake this is fake that, he's at least taken a step back and got, okay, well, what is it about my platform that is now turning people off? Let me have a conversation with some people to see what it is I'm doing wrong. Whereas Trump just says, oh, that's fake news. Fake news. Cletus, you know all about it. You fucking support him. I saw you with your red Make America Great Again hat. He posted it on Twitter and tagged us in it.
Hold on. We have an actual listener called Cletus.
No, but there's going to be that fake Cletus listener out there. We've been talking very in-depth on politics and...
Are you going to digress? Because
I want to digress. So let's just go one more thing, and then let's get off of politics.
Yeah,
I think we should.
It's not really one thing, and you mentioned it briefly. One thing I want to applaud Mr. Trump for is the 17-day holiday. I'm not even joking. I actually want him to applaud him for the bravery, because this is, look, what I hate most about modern society, modern employment, the modern jobs market. And this is partly the reason why the UK is probably the least productive developed country in the European Union, is this idea of doing unnecessary work in the office. You know, you do, most of us, I mean, not most of us, but a lot of us, you know, we have, say, our 8-9 hours in the office. We get done after 3-4 hours, and then we just do fuck all. We browse Reddit, we write unnecessary emails, we take extra long coffee breaks, extra long lunches, etc. Our work can be done in 3-4 hours. And then the rest we can have just off. But there's a societal peer pressure. There's this thing that you have to work hard to get things. And actually, if you work hard, you finish early. And then you have nothing else to do. And you know, it's starting to affect holidays as well, where, you know, you have in the UK you have mandatory, you know, you need to get those 20 days plus bank holidays. Most companies do 25 days plus bank holidays, etc. And that's the time off you have. In the States, you don't have that. But even now here, some companies are saying, unlimited holidays. You know, Google and the tech companies have unlimited holidays. And you think, great, I can go fuck off to Asia for 2 months. You know, go to Ladyboy camp, or I don't know what you do in Asia when you're on holiday.
Sorry, Asians, and anybody who goes to Asia. Jesus Christ. Is there anyone else you want to, like...
No, I'm good for... No, maybe cut that one out.
No, if my shit gets in there, your shit stays in there.
Okay, we can take... No, it's just I was reading an article before this about the ladyboy tourist industry. It's quite interesting. Anyway,
know where you're going on holiday.
Never appealed, again, much like strip joints, never appealed to me, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I shouldn't criticize stuff I haven't tried, I guess. But anyway, you know, you have this whole unlimited holiday, you can go on holiday, and what it ends up statistically is if you have unlimited holiday, you actually go less on holiday less than you would with a mandatory one, because it's part of that, you know, culture, that sort of pressure that you have to do work, even though you don't need to. And this is why I applaud Mr. Trump for finally breaking that myth that you have to, you know, because there's this assumption if you're the president of the United States, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, frankly,
he takes every fucking weekend off to go golfing.
Yeah, fine. What is in his 180 days in the office? He spent 50 days on holiday or something like that? Yeah. Well, if he can get 180 days work done in 130 days. Good on him.
He hasn't done any work, though.
Well, that's... Look, it's not...
Healthcare, failure.
If...
Travel ban, failure.
Yeah, fine. But if...
Only thing he's done is made money for himself.
That doesn't matter. If he's a shit employee, fine. But if he gets his shitty work done in less time than he needs, then it's allocated and takes the rest on a holiday, that's your problem as an employer. That's not his problem. Maybe
I know he needs a review.
Well, fine, impeach him, but no one seems to be...
He needs a one-to-one.
So people seem to be happy with this performance.
No, they aren't.
Well, then do something.
The way that the way it's set up, the only one that can do it is Congress, and Congress are a bunch of pussies that can't even get anything passed.
Well, yeah, fine. But again, not his problem. He tries to do shit. He got what he wanted to do done in 130 days. He can take the rest 50 on holiday. I don't feel why you should force him to sit in the office and do fuck all when he frankly has done what he's wanted to do. Now it's time for him to go.
He sits in the office and does fuck all now.
Well, exactly. So he just...
He sits on Twitter like a 14-year-old kid trolling people.
Well, exactly. That's my point. So he might as well be on holiday.
All right. Jeez. Okay. Moving away from Trump, we're going to move on to... Now, I'm wondering if maybe... And before I say this, there's a individual who allegedly did something in this country. And I'm going to say alleged because I don't want to be held accountable. Because in this country, I can besmirch Donald Trump. That's fine. Can't be held accountable. If I besmirch this person, I can actually be held accountable. And I could probably go to jail for it. So there was a former prime minister who had an affair with a pig. Literally. Allegedly. And I came across this article, and
he's talking about David Cameron, who shagged a pig's head.
Yeah, well, allegedly
at a university initiation.
Allegedly. So, in a small Swedish town has been rocked by a bizarre crime involving pig mass, sex, Pokemon, and lasers. Now, to me, that's a headline that makes me go, I want to know what the hell happened.
Pig mass.
Pig mass. Okay. The tiny town of how did we say it? Inhwe?
Inhwe.
Inhwe, with just 2,000 inhabitants, became the talk of the nation when two teenagers who were out playing Pokemon Go were attacked with lasers by a pair of people wearing pig masks.
How?
They were later caught holding up traffic as they had... They were later caught holding up traffic as they had sex by a water wheel.
Who? The pig mask people? Or the...
Yes. They wore rubber masks depicting pigs' heads and started screaming and waving around a green laser, one of the victims told the newspaper. The same pair, unidentified laser-wielding mask wearers, who also wore matching T-shirts emblazoned with the words King and Queen, were spotted later that day engaging in sexual intercourse by the town's historic water wheel. Motorists found themselves stuck in traffic jams as people slowed down or stopped their cars to look at the couples having sex in public. Police are currently hoping to find the culprits, as public sex is a criminal act and lasers can cause serious harm. Pointing at someone with green lasers can cause injury if it hits their eyes. That's what the police officer said.
So these weren't even like lightsabers. These were just literally one
Laser
of those
pens.
Laser pointers you
Yes.
use at presentations.
Yes. And they were shooting at these people that were playing Pokemon Go, and then deciding...
No, you're not. You're not shooting.
Okay, pointing.
You don't attack someone with
So you're pointing at it. Yes. And then they went to the historic water wheel, which is in the town's center, and started... I'm guessing it would be somewhere along the lines of doggy style, bent over the water wheel. And the King and Queen shirts just
Could you please send me that article?
Yes, I will send you that article. You just want to read through it.
No. Yes.
I was taken aback. I was looking for random shit on the internet this week, and I went, "This is brilliant."
Sweden. 5 miserable, dull, out of my mind, bored years I have spent inside you. Where were the King and Queen? What? Why didn't you show this? I could have still been in you. We could have had so much fun.
To me, I went, "This is a holiday." Like, I wanted to book tickets. I was...
I mean, but it says so much about the mentality of Swedes, where you're playing Pokemon Go and someone runs with a laser pointer at you, and you report it as being attacked by lasers.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Well, I have one more thing that goes on the conspiracy tip that I did want to talk about, and then we'll get into a few segments that you have.
I also have a story as well.
Well, good. I'd like to hear it. Now, so a couple months ago, well, no, now it's been almost 7-8 months. Max Spires, he was 39-year-old conspiracy theorist from Britain. He's from Canterbury, Kent, and he was
lovely place.
Said to be probing into the lives of well-known British figures in politics, business, and entertainment. His friend said, "I think Max had been digging into some dark places and somebody wanted him dead." Spires, who went to school with Orlando Bloom, had visited Poland after holidaying in Cyprus with a friend. And while in Poland, he died 24 hours after arriving. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up to you is your medical background. What would cause an individual to vomit black fluid?
Eating lots of ink.
I mean, look, he was he was, from what everyone can say, is he was in great shape. He was very fit, and in a statement by investigation officer, Mr. Spires became ill with a high temperature and was weak. The following day, he vomited 2 liters of black fluid.
Look, it's black, either stool or vomit.
Well, I mean, I heard black stool is really bad. Go to the hospital right away because you're fucking dying.
Yeah, unless, again, you've been eating lots of squid ink, which also turns your stool black.
Okay, but other than that...
But, I mean, vomit is generally tricky because, well, it could literally be that you've drank a lot of coffee and then you vomit it out.
Okay.
Same with squid ink. But it could also mean internal bleeding that's been going on for a while, and sort of old blood turns dark, which is why, say if you have black stools, if you have blood in your stools, if it's bright red, it's generally probably from a tear on your sphincter, and that, or a hemorrhoid or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's black, it means it's internal bleeding, which is not good. So same thing could be with vomiting, but it could be that just drank oil and vomited that. I mean, depending on the circumstances.
Okay. Well, I was just curious. The conspiracy's going around. So he was poisoned in Cyprus, and then he died in Poland, and Spires had all these... all the information he was going to put out would be harmful to politicians and businessmen. So it caught my attention. I read about it when it happened, and then it was one of those things that kind of went to the back shelf of the mind, and then it somehow resurfaced recently as like hey, maybe you've heard about this conspiracy. Donnie, because of his fake news constantly, that conspiracy, like any tale from the last 6 to 8 months that's conspiracy related, is being rehashed because, it's a conspiracy that I did anything with Russia. It's big government trying to bring us all down because, well, I don't know why Donnie's talking like George Bush.
It's an accent.
I'll have to work on that. I'll have to work on I'm the greatest. No. See, I can't do a Donnie. George Bush was easy because he was just, all you'd have to think is mentally challenged, but he wasn't.
Look, Nick, not everyone is as good as accents than I.
I know. You are definitely a cut above the rest.
Yeah, name an accent, I can do it.
You should hear his Szechuan Chinese accent.
Yeah, that's right.
You should hear his...
I am from Guangzhou, China.
You should hear when he talks in his South African native accent.
Yeah. I am from South African native land. I come from Cape Town.
See, I was thinking about it the other day. I had one of the clients who went to go visit. He asked me, he goes, wow, you've been here for 5-6 years. I said, yeah. He goes, your accent, you still have a thick American accent. And I went, yeah. And I didn't realize it was supposed to change. And he goes, but do you pick up any of the vernacular? Like, he was really, it was very interesting because he was really, like, the speech pattern that I had gone off. He was very intrigued by it. So he goes, do you say anything like cheers or mate or anything like that? I'm all, when I say cheers, it sounds horrible. And when I say mate, it sounds...
fake.
Exactly. Nothing about it. I can't even say aluminum the way that you guys say it because it sounds horrible. I just can't. I can't say schedule. Like, those... None of that works.
I can't say schedule.
Yes, and router. Hey, if you look at the About Us section of the website for my company, my employees took the piss out of me. Literally on the About Us section. Well, I'll have you take a look at it afterwards, and you'll see they literally take the piss out of me for the way I talk. This is the About Us page. Director said, "Oh yeah, it's brilliant. I love it." And now she tells every single client we have, "Oh yeah, this is the kind of marketing agency we are. We're doing things differently."
Like, what? Insulting our own employees?
Apparently, that's what we're doing. Maybe that's why it is I got paid what I got paid. It's adding insult to injury. But enough about that. Before you jump into your story that you have now, I did want to remind people to be sure to go to jsbspod.com. Leave a comment. We'd appreciate if you go to iTunes and rate and review the show. Also subscribe. Tell a friend. The best way for us to continue to climb the charts is for you to tell friends, and then they in turn subscribe, and they tell a friend, and then they tell a friend, and then they tell a friend.
Begin climbing the chart.
Also, be sure to head over to facebook.com/JSBSpod. You can find us on Twitter @JSBSpod, Instagram JSBSpod, or find us on Patreon at patreon.com/JSBSpod. Subscribe on YouTube and also on Vimeo, both JSBSpod.
Nick, how much do you think you're worth as a person? If you were to put a price on yourself.
About 2 bits. In Lily's eyes, I'm probably worth every single penny that could ever be made. In the rest of the world's worth. My life's a little bit different now, so I don't think my value is, from a work perspective, I'd be a pretty good slave, I think. If I was sold into slavery,
let's put it this way.
I could get probably about 50 quid for me. My kidneys are probably worth about 25 grand.
Let's put it this way. I guess you as a person, or anybody as a person, is defined by them being them. By them having the time to be themselves.
Okay.
Right? If 100% of your time is being spent following other people's orders, you're not really you. You're not a person because you don't have the time to express. You're just someone else's instrument, right?
Yes.
Therefore, conversely, if you own 100% of your time, you're fully yourself. It's just you're not making money because no one is paying you to be yourself. So let's say you enter a contractual relationship with an employee where they own a significant amount of your time.
Okay.
And they pay you for it, etc. But you can put a price whereby if you want to buy your time back, you pay that price, and all of a sudden your time is your own again. Where would you put that price?
I don't know. Probably about £50 per hour, maybe.
Totally. You sign, say, a 5-year contract.
Okay.
With your employer.
Yeah.
And you can buy yourself out of that contract at any point. It's the same sum, regardless of whether you buy yourself 1 year in or 4.5 years in.
You know what? I've never really thought about it. I think because I've never had to think about this. Let's see, 5 years, I would estimate my value to an employer from just a purely work-related. I'm looking at 5 years is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of almost 300 grand. 5-year contract, somewhere in that range, including commissions and everything else. We're looking at about 5 years, 300 grand.
So you'd say you're worth $300,000
for a 5-year period. Yeah, I'd say 300,000. So to buy out early, yeah, I would have to figure out a way to come up with that 300 grand.
Okay. There's a person in the world who is worth somewhere around 700 times as you are.
Who, Bezos?
Nope. As a value, not what they own, but their worth as a person. Not what they own, but their own person time value, which is one Neymar Jr. Of Brazil, who this week made a transfer from FC Barcelona, which is a Spanish football or soccer football club.
Yes.
Moved to Paris Saint-Germain.
Okay.
In Paris. Now, for the world's first £200 million transfer. Now, the world record transfer about 30 years ago was £1 million. Cristiano Ronaldo, when he moved from Manchester United to Real Madrid, that was about £80 million. I believe the world's most expensive transfer last year was Paul Pogba from Juventus to Manchester United for about £100 million, which is quite funny because Paul Pogba left Manchester United to Juventus for free a few years before Manchester United broke the world transfer record to get him back for £100 million. In a year, this fee has now doubled. And I thought I'd bring it up, as even for people who don't normally follow football, because it's such an interesting saga on so many levels. The two best players in the world are Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yes.
Neymar arguably is behind them the next year, the third best player. Some would dispute it, but he is probably the third best player in the world. He was bought by Barcelona a few years back in a deal of worth roughly, they said 30-something million pounds. Turns out it's about £75 million, and they were subsequently investigated for several cases of tax fraud relating to this transfer, and it's still shrouded in suspicion, as it turned out, for instance, that his father was given sex orgies as part of the negotiations, and
Dude, I need to have a footballer as a son.
Prostitutes, a plane.
A plane?
Yeah, a plane. Coffee, hotels, 200 coffees, in fact. But he joined FC Barcelona, where he formed a formidable strike partnership with Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, and they scored something 250 goals in 280 matches they played together. It was a ridiculous partnership, probably the best there's ever been. Problem is that when you play for Barcelona, you're always under the shadow of Lionel Messi. But that's besides the point. The way Spanish contracts work is the way football contracts work is if you sign a contract for 5 years, that club owns you. You can't just quit. You can retire, but you can't just quit and sign for somebody else. If you want to move, that club has to pay a transfer for you. Now, in Spain and Spanish law, this is deemed as borderline slavery. You can't just own people.
Yeah.
And because footballing is such a way where you can't just hand in your contract notice, they say that there has to be a legal limit, a legal fee that you can pay to free yourself of this contract.
Okay.
This is just Spain. Other countries don't. Other countries work differently. Say in the UK, you have to fulfill your contract. After it runs out, then you can move. But if you sign 5 years, you're there for 5 years until someone pays an acceptable amount of money for you. But because this is, for Spanish clubs, this is such a annoying clause, because that means anyone can just come in and take your player. Whilst other clubs around Europe, they have to negotiate until they find a fee that the club accepts. So historically, in Spain, clubs put this release fee, minimum release clause as it's called, at staggering levels. So say Cristiano Ronaldo is €1 billion.
Oh, shit.
So they technically fulfill the conditions of Spanish law, but no club could realistically ever pay €1 billion. So when Neymar joined Barcelona all those years ago, his fee was set at €222 million, which then was considered an absolutely ridiculous fee.
Yeah.
No one ever thought they could achieve it for one simple reason. In the noughties, there was a trend, I mean before then, but it really peaked in the noughties with Roman Abramovich purchasing Chelsea, where you had the sugar daddy football club owner, where it was someone who came in, spent, with a billionaire, came in, spent millions of pounds just buying players. Then you had, the Arab Emirates buying Manchester City as well, spent millions of pounds, and they just bought the best players in the world, and all of a sudden a mid-tier, mediocre club turned into world beaters, which drew a lot of protest. A, sucking the soul out of football, and B, because it also led to a lot of speculative purchases where millionaires would buy clubs as a plaything, and a year or two later they would either go bankrupt or they'd stopped caring, and those clubs would all of a sudden run out of money and they'd be relegated, a real existential crisis, etc. So the European Football Federation, UEFA, to mitigate this, introduced the financial fair play rules, which weren't necessarily meant to stop sugar daddies or to stop the rise of big clubs, as some people interpreted it would. Its essential point was, as a club, you can only spend the money you earn.
Mm-hmm.
Or over a 3-year period, you can have a 30 million euro deficit, but no more than that. If you go over that, you get financial fees, points deductions, and worst case scenario, you get barred from European competition. And European competitions, such as the Champions League, are the most lucrative, both in terms of prize money, exposure, and the marketing. So it was quite a big punishment. So Neymar's fee at that time when he signed that contract, 222 million euros, would have been seen as unattainable for clubs, but because there is simply no club in the world that makes enough money to be able to buy Neymar and still fulfill the conditions of the financial fair play rules, which came in 2011-2012. So how did this transfer happen?
I don't know.
A few years ago, the Qatari investment fund bought Paris Saint-Germain.
Okay.
And the way these clubs, Manchester City, etc., went around financial fair play is these are clubs not owned by a company or a person. This is not like US franchises. A person owns it. There you have some millionaire, George Gillett or whatever. Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain are effectively owned by countries.
Okay.
Because they're owned by the country somewhere. Yeah. Manchester City's owner has ties to the United Arab Emirates royal family, whilst Paris Saint-Germain is owned by the government's investment fund. Qatar and Arab Emirates own other companies as well. So what you have is Manchester City would sign these ridiculous sponsorship deals where a different company, say the Etihad Airlines, would pay ludicrous amounts of money as a sponsorship deal to Manchester City, and then Manchester City could then buy players.
Oh, nice workaround.
Because they didn't have to negotiate with Nike or Adidas or whatever. It was a different company signing a corporate deal, but since they're all owned by the government, it's effectively injecting money against the rules. So the financial fair play rules were amended to prohibit this sort of thing. And this is where this is why I want to highlight this case, because it's just such a beautiful use of loopholes. So how did the Neymar transfer happen? You no longer can do the sponsorship deal. Well, the way the release clause works in Spain, you can't have a club just come in and pay, because this is ultimately a workers' rights thing. So the worker, in this case the footballer, in this case Neymar, someone can't come in and just buy him through this clause. He has to pay the clause to release himself from the contract.
Yes.
And then he can sign for someone else. Now, traditionally, the buying club pays the player, the player places parent club releases him from the contract, and the player signs for his new club. But if Paris Saint-Germain paid Neymar the money, that would count as an expenditure on their account, and they would never fulfill the financial fair play rules.
Okay.
So what happened is Qatar, the country, signed a sponsorship deal with Neymar, the person, worth 300 million euros, where Neymar officially becomes Qatar's ambassador for the 2022 World Cup, which is already shrouded. Qatar's win is already shrouded in lots of corruption allegations because of all the candidates for the 2022 World Cup. FIFA's own investigatory committee ruled that Qatar is the most ill-suited to host it, and then subsequently Qatar won. So Neymar, for 300 million euros, becomes Qatar's official ambassador for the 2022 World Cup, and as it happens, he has all this spare cash, which means he can buy himself release himself from the Barcelona contract, and then sign for Paris Saint-Germain, which also coincidentally happens to be owned by Qatar, but in a completely different capacity. And that's the story of Neymar being the world's most expensive person.
Wow. Corrupt as fuck.
And perfectly legal.
But corrupt as Trump is looking at that going, Jesus Christ, I need to come up with loopholes like that.
Schooled us all.
They did.
Normally don't want to digress into football because it's such a complicated thing and such a personal thing, but I thought this was a story that was...
Wow. I mean, I kept seeing the name via Twitter, and it was trending and all this other shit, but I just went, it's football, it's way over my head. It's bad acting and guys running around chasing balls.
We had an edit and now we don't know what to do.
No, I know what to do. You just need to actually start talking.
No, I wanted you to say something, but fine. I'll say.
Hey, this segment's all about you. This is the I'm constantly getting feedback. Not enough beer doctor, too much American, and so this is what the beer doctor brought us this week.
Careful what you wish for. Right, so few episodes ago we introduced a new segment.
Yes.
Where we try to, we think 1 week we're sort of one murderous maniac every 2 episodes is enough, so we try to give you a unusually minded person.
Unusually minded.
The other two.
Could you be more politically correct? Unusually minded.
No, but because I say that deliberately because I don't want to use the word crazy because they're not necessarily all crazy. And as in our sort of the first time we did this segment with, and the last time we've done this segment so far with June and Jennifer Gibbons, they weren't crazy. Some people thought they were, but as we explained, it was through a very unusual. They were normal people who just had to adapt to a very unusual set of circumstances.
Yeah, they lived
which led them to be perceived as unusual, but they were not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so with June and Jennifer, we had 2 separate individuals who kind of grew to have a same mind, same cognizance of sort. They almost seem to exist as one person through their mirrored catatonic states and mirrored sort of eating habits, mirrored speaking habits. They seem to be one person through separate bodies.
Yeah, they started to share a brain almost, which was a bit like...
Exactly. So I thought, let's turn this for this week. Let's turn this concept on its head. And look at people who share the same body, but are 2 different people. So this episode, we're going to go, not necessarily a representative, but we're going to go on a symbolic journey of the world of conjoined twins across 3 centuries.
Oh, okay.
And just very briefly touch on, well, not briefly, I'll touch on 3 stories, one in detail, one in less detail, and one very briefly for the future. But where else to start the journey than the original conjoined twins, or the original, as the colloquial term is, Siamese twins? The case that started this term, the case of Chang and Eng Bunker, who were born in Thailand in 1811, early 19th century. This is where our journey begins, and they were Thailand at that time was called Siam.
Well, here's the thing, I'm a bit confused because this is now the second time you're bringing up Thailand. So you were talking about ladyboys earlier.
They were not ladyboys.
Oh no, but you were talking about ladyboys earlier, and now you're talking about Siamese twins from Thailand. Are you going on holiday you want to tell me about?
No.
Have you been researching something that, did Holiday Pirates or something like that send you a deal for...
Fine, I want a conjoined ladyboy. Is that what you wanted to hear?
There's probably porn out there for that.
Well, no, there is actually a conjoined ladyboy. I wasn't going to mention them because they're actually alive, and it if we had more time I would discuss them, but there are actually conjoined twins in America They're I believe the
Teenage Girls.
No, they're the longest survivor. They were born in the 50s, so they're in their 60s now.
I have no idea.
But they were actually born as girls, but one of them had a sex change, and is now a boy. So it is, on a purely technical level, a conjoined ladyboy, which is horrible to say. But on a purely technical level, it's quite interesting.
Takes trans to a whole new.
Well, no, this is the contrast I want to paint with against June and Jennifer, who were two separate bodies, practically the same mind, at times. Now we're talking about what I was interested in for this episode was the idea of the psychology of conjoined twins, because you're stuck with someone, and in all fairness, most conjoined twins die at an early age, or are separated, or die when they're during separation. So we're going to take cases that actually survive for a longer period of time, and they exist more than people would like, more than people perhaps might think. Now let's start with Chang and Eng bunker. As we said, the story starts off in Thailand or Siam, where they were conjoined on the sternum in their chest. So it's basically a tube almost joining them roughly where your stomach is, or liver, I should say, because liver is what they shared.
Okay.
Chang and Eng were actually perfectly able-minded guys. They had separate brains, so they were, for all intents and purposes, the same people. Separate people, but because they were joined at the liver, they couldn't be separated. If you separated them, they would die.
Okay.
Plus, surgery in Thailand at the beginning of the 19th century wasn't particularly cutting edge. Because they were quite independent, quite sort of go-getter type people, which I guess you have to be to survive in society as a conjoined twin. They learned to adapt, and they were quite quick, and they soon became quite a known curiosity around Thailand, to the point where they were when they were boys, named personal emissaries of the Thai king. They moved to Bangkok, and there they were noticed by a Scottish entrepreneur who saw the immense marketing potential of conjoined twins.
Silver-haired, white, middle-aged man.
So this Scottish gentleman brought Chang and Eng to the United States of America, where they, quite frankly, started the conjoined twin stereotype. He effectively enrolled them in a freak show, where he toured the country with them, with the Siamese twins, and they would get paid for this. And in fact, this is pretty much, they've set the template for conjoined twins for the next 100 and 150 years.
Okay.
Where, and even to this day, where conjoined twins that survive to this day, the Spider Girls of West Bengal, for instance, they earn their money in freak shows. That is the thing you did as a conjoined twin, because you were so ostracized by society, and often not by your own choice, because schools wouldn't accept you, because it was a distraction. There was another case from the UK where these girls were very intelligent, but no school would take them because they were seen as a distraction for the other kids. So they starred in the 1929 film Freaks, or early 30s film, which is a pre-code film, very interesting film about unusually bodied people.
Okay.
But let's go back to Chang and Eng. They started this template. They toured freak show, and they made, in mid-19th century America, they made a ton of money.
Yeah.
So after they've sort of finished their touring, after they've had enough money, they became naturalized US citizens, and they settled in...
Not in Trump's America.
Not in Trump's, but this was the tolerant pre-Civil War America. Lying.
Hold on. Compared to America now, pre-Civil War America was more tolerant.
Wait for this. These gentlemen with their hard-earned money, settled in North Carolina. They settled in the South,
Okay.
where they bought farms and became farmers. Now, they settled in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, small town. They became successful businessmen through their farms, and they married. They married two sisters, Adelaide and Sarah Yates. Chang and Adelaide fell in love.
Yeah.
Sarah and Eng tolerated each other. But because they weren't in love, but they tolerated each other, and because they felt, well, Chang and Adelaide are in love,
Yes.
and want to get married, it was kind of the logical thing to do. And they felt that the romance couldn't go forward unless Sarah and Eng's evolved to the same level.
Okay.
So Chang and Eng proposed to Adelaide and Sarah, and they decided to have a double wedding. But Sarah and Adelaide's father objected to the wedding.
Okay. Well, Sarah, I've just pulled up a picture of her. She doesn't seem like she's a very,
Loving person. No, I know. But get this. Sarah and Adelaide's father objected to the marriage. Why?
because they were Asian.
Yes. Not because they were conjoined twins. Adelaide and Sarah's father objected to the double wedding with the conjoined twins in a small town in North Carolina because Chang and Eng were Asian.
Not because they were freaks.
No.
As the freak show type thing. Not calling them freaks, but not because they were conceived as freaks. But because they had slant eyes and spoke with a broken accent.
Yes.
Okay. But they were well off. They ran businesses. They did everything.
And this ultimately, because they were well off, they were actually respected members of the community, and they were seen very positively in their local Christian church, which they joined. Chang and Eng became Christians. The father
Well, because if you're going to believe in God, I mean, you have to know that God created us in His image.
Yeah. I'm not going to comment on that. I've said enough troublesome things this episode already.
I'm fine with throwing that one out there. To all you Christians out there, that's your image.
Amongst others. I'm going to add in a more conciliatory tone. So if the father eventually relented and said, fine, you can get married, so Chang and Adelaide and Eng and Sarah had a double wedding.
Okay.
Over the next few years, Chang and Adelaide and Sarah and Eng together had 21 children.
Holy fuck.
Chang and Adelaide had 11. Sarah and Eng had 10.
For not liking him, she sure did.
As a digression, it is now estimated that Chang and Eng have about 1,500 descendants living today, and they meet every year for a big Chang and Eng bunker reunion. One of their descendants ran for Florida governor as a Democrat. So they were good.
Well, I mean, they have Jeb Bush in there, so anybody could be fucking governor of California. Florida.
She lost to Jeb Bush, incidentally. So yeah,
she should have played up the Chang and Eng model a bit more.
Yeah, they still have reunions every year. But anyway, so they had 21 children, but eventually, not Chang and Eng, Adelaide and Sarah began to dislike each other.
So the sisters started to not like the fact that they had to spend so much time together. And so they, in turn, rebelled against each other?
They just didn't get on as sisters, and they didn't enjoy because they basically all of them slept in one big custom-made bed. So if you exist with some, I mean, look, if you're, it makes sense from a psychological perspective. It makes sense.
I would just,
if if you're Chang and Eng,
Yes.
you exist together, and
You're stuck. That's just your life. You understand it.
that's your lot, and you told early on you can't be separated. So you do with the best with what you got, and you get used to it. So
Yeah.
you coexist together. Sarah and Adelaide were independent people, but through circumstance they were forced to effectively live as conjoined twins because they were there all the time. Yeah, so I can see why that would breed resentment where you don't need to have that situation.
Okay, hold on. Because this just bugged me. So 21 kids.
Yeah.
Do you think they took turns when they were going to conceive children?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
So what would happen is one couple had sex, and the other would kind of just zone out, as it was described. They would go into a trance, and they just sort of just ignore it.
How do you do that, like, pre-cell phone? Like, now it could just be, oh, I'm sitting on Twitter and I don't have to deal with you. Or, oh, I'm watching dog videos.
Conjoined twin having sex again.
Yeah, or just, like, Netflix and not chill, because it wouldn't be chill at all. Like, what the Okay, no, it's fine. All right, I'm digressing and I shouldn't be. Let's go back to... Yeah.
This is something that listeners and yourself can take to bed with you tonight and think about. What would I do in that situation before cell phones? So, it was this coexistence for a while, but eventually Adelaide and Sarah began disliking each other, so the twins decided, we're going to build separate houses. So Chang built a house on one farm, Eng built a house on another farm, Sarah lived in one, Adelaide lived in the other, and they divide their time 50-50 between the two households, and that's how they continued to coexist.
Okay.
Civil War rolls around.
As it does.
And Chang and Eng invest heavily into the Confederacy.
Oh, fuck.
To the point where the eldest sons of each enlisted in the Confederate Army and found on the Confederate side, and to continue to run business and support the Confederate side, Chang and Eng took on loans from Confederate banks.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Now, for the history buffs amongst you, the Union won the Civil War, led by President Abraham Lincoln, and the Confederate side lost, unless you believe that's fake news. And
the South will rise again. Maybe this is what it is. So, Chang and Eng's descendants get together every year to plot how the South will rise again, which in turn will bring back the dominance of entrepreneurial spirit that their forefather had.
Perhaps.
Okay, is that like a hindsight is 20/20 thing? So is it one of those things where you go like this and you go, you know what? Okay, so case in point.
I should also note, I forgot to mention, Chang and Eng, the farms,
yes.
They made money, slave labor. They bought slaves. Carry on.
Conjoined twins.
From Thailand.
Refugees.
Not refugees, economic migrants.
Economic migrants. From Asia.
Thailand, yes. Thailand.
Moved to the south of America.
Yeah. Make money doing freak shows.
Bought slaves?
Yeah. You can see why they would invest heavily into the Confederacy. It's the ultimate. I mean, if this was today, right? If this was today, there would be, by people like Mr. Trump or,
Alex Jones.
And or
Tommy Lauren.
Ted Cruz and those people, there would be like like UKIP has token minority members and they're played out, oh look how tolerant. Chang and Eng would be the poster children of the tolerant wing of the fundamentalist Republican Party.
But I just... it fucking makes my brain hurt. What would they think? Move on. I can't. I can't. No, I can't. Just go. Go.
So, Confederacy loses. Confederate banks disappear. Confederate currency crashes, disappears. Chang and Eng lose most of their money.
Okay.
And slaves. Faced with no money, Chang and Eng decide to hit the road again, and what worked 30, 40 years ago, they think they can work again, so they return to the conjoined twin cliche of starting to participate in freak shows. Problem is, people seen it by then. It was not a major success. For a time, they decided to bring their children with them to sort of show the contrast. Look, we have children separate. That drew some attention for a while, but afterwards, again, the fad disappeared fairly quickly, and they couldn't make any money. They tried to go to Europe, where they had a bit more success, but the return to the road, they were getting older, took a mental toll, and Chang turned to alcoholism.
It's not funny, but it's funny. Okay, hold on. Okay, so how does this work? If you're a conjoined twin...
Yeah.
Okay, so you and I are conjoined twins. I know you're an alcoholic, but...
So are you, so we're fine.
Okay, say I was a teetotaler. When you get hammered and you're stumbling and slurring, I can't just put you to bed and then go off and watch TV. I've got to deal with you being hammered, drunk, and slurring, and probably being abusive.
This led to some tensions.
Fucking, yeah! You deal with a roommate who's a drunk, and it's probably gives you a bit of issues, or a spouse. How the fuck are you gonna deal with a conjoined twin when you're not a drunk alcoholic, and they're like, fuck this world, I'm drinking myself to death?
There were tensions.
Fuck. Understatement of the year.
To the point where the twins at this point, they were talking late 60s, pulled their money.
Yeah.
And decided to, through whatever means necessary, become separated.
Okay.
So they toured the preeminent surgeons across the states to see how they can be separated. And it was at that point it was discovered that their livers are joint, and therefore they had zero chance of surviving a separation.
Mm-hmm.
This drew Chang even further into drink, and his failing health led to the fact that he had a stroke. Late 1860s, early 1870s, I forget. He had a stroke, which left him with limited ability to walk, to the point where Eng had to be fitted with a special brace so that he could help Chang move.
Okay.
This led to some tensions.
Okay.
But as she tends to do in these cases, God decided, I've had enough fun. You can have too much of a good thing.
Cancelled that series? Was it like this one and then just went, what's the newest series on Netflix? Yeah, I'm just gonna cancel this one. I'm good. She can be very temperamental with her TV watching.
So God said, right, Chang, done. And Chang died what's either pulmonary edema or a cerebral blood clot, some sort of cardiovascular disease. It had never been successfully ascertained.
Yeah.
But due to his failing health and alcohol abuse, etc., multiple things coincided, a previous stroke, etc. Chang died, at which point Eng declared, well, then I am going, which were his last words, and 3 hours Eng as well was dead. He could have survived. There could have been an emergency separation, but the doctors just didn't get there on time. So Eng died as well on the 17th of January, 1874, aged 62.
All right. So if you learned anything from this, if you're a conjoined twin, don't live so far away from a hospital. It takes 3 hours to get there. If you need to be emergency, either that or have a sharp knife handy.
Exactly 100 years later.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
On the 17th of January, 1974.
Yes.
Ladan and Lale Bijani
Italians?
Nope. Iranians were born
Okay.
in Iran, which I'm not going to spend as much time with them, but it paints a picture of how things have changed and how things have not changed.
Okay.
So Ladan and Bijani were also conjoined, but they were conjoined at the head.
Oh, gosh.
They didn't share brains, well, not the thinking parts of brains, so they were independent people.
Yes.
But their story is somewhat sad because they were born, and when they were obviously because of their conjointedness,
yes.
they had to spend much of their childhood in hospital care. Issue arose where the doctors in a hospital they were in had to leave the country due to the ongoing Iranian revolution in 1979 to the point where the girls were lost.
Oh, okay.
As in they just because the revolution, chaos, they disappeared from the hospital. The parents couldn't find them. The hospital couldn't find the parents, so one of their doctors who stayed in Iran adopted them. A few years later, they were found. The parents successfully sued for custody, but the girls decided to stay with their adoptive doctor parent, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They were extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
Fiercely independent and very, very different. Ladan was an outspoken, extroverted type. She wanted to study law in Tehran, liked computer programming, etc. Lale was a more introverted girl. She liked to play computer games and wanted to study journalism.
Mm-hmm.
They had a policy where every decision they made, they had to reach in unison, and this sort of separate choice of careers was one of the big points of contention and one they couldn't agree. Eventually, they decided to go with Ladan's choice, and they studied law in Tehran.
Okay.
They had ongoing problems with this. Because they were so intelligent and so independent, they just couldn't exist as conjoined twins. They tried to be separated in 1996 by a German team, but the German team assessed that it's just not possible because they were conjoined at the head, and they shared a sagittal sinus, which is sort of at the top of your head. There's a big blood vessel.
Yeah, that runs blood from the brain to the body to,
amongst other things.
Yeah.
Whilst their thinking brain structures weren't shared, they shared this blood vessel, which posed a big challenge. But this career choice contention got so heated that they decided in 2003, late 2000, they made the decision, but they decided in 2003 to undergo surgery. It was a multinational team of world experts, and one of the leading world experts in conjoined twin neurosurgery at the time was one Dr. Ben Carson, who you might remember as currently is the Secretary for Housing in the United States.
Who knows fucking nothing about housing, but yes, he's the
But
Secretary
he
of
knows a
Housing.
lot about separating conjoined twins. So
Well, he does know a lot about the brain. He's a neurosurgeon. He's a fucking brilliant neurosurgeon, just doesn't understand housing.
So he was one of the three key eminent members of this international team who attempted to perform this operation in Singapore, but unfortunately the blood loss of both of them was so severe that they died, which was quite a sad end. They died at the age of 29.
Yes.
The reason I'm bringing this up is that not everyone... I mean, Chang and Eng had a troubled existence, but they lived their natural lives, which is quite unusual. Ultimately, the differences for these girls were so severe that they decided to take that minuscule chance of survival
Over a
over
lifetime
over continued existence as twins. So that was kind of the second generation. The third generation, I'll mention very briefly because they're very young, are Tatiana and Krista Hogan in Canada. Now, these girls are only 8 years old, I believe, or let me double check, or might be 9 years old now. But what's special about them, they're also joined at the head, they also are joined at the brains, to the point where even the thinking bits of the brains, some of them, are conjoined. Now, not many experiments can be made on these girls. The study potential is very limited. It's only been observational so far, because of the fact that they're so young. You can't subject them to lab experiments, or the sort of rigorous cognitive testing you would do with an adult. But the interesting thing about them is that there is evidence that they actually share thoughts. I mean, they have different mouths. They talk about different things.
Yeah.
I mean, they seem to have somewhat different personalities, but they laugh at each other's jokes without ever actually saying them. So, one to keep an eye out on.
I will post pictures in the show notes for each of the sets of twins so people can get an idea of what they look like and be able to visualize who it was that Radovan was discussing. There was one other one that was a British set of conjoined twins that I thought you were going to mention, that they died of something that I had never heard of before, and I was hoping that you would actually because it sounds like a bullshit thing, but it must have been real. They were Daisy and Violet Hilton.
Yep, those were the ones who acted in the Freaks film.
British conjoined twins. They were exhibited in Europe as children and toured the United States in sideshow, vaudeville, and American burlesque. They're best known for their film and appearance in Freaks and Chained for Life. But they died of Hong Kong flu?
Yeah.
Like, that's a real thing?
Yeah, it's one of those, like you had the SARS-y things, or the Spanish flu, etc.
Okay.
It's one of those flu epidemics that killed a lot of people, which, I mean, they basically, I would assume, shared parts of an immunity system. It would have been weakened if you have, something infecting
virus
two bodies.
I don't know, just... yeah, they say it's similar to the Asian flu, H2N2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it was a pandemic flu, and that was it. All right, so wasn't crazy. To call them freaks is... It's not even about being politically correct or anything like that. They're not freaks. Some of them did perform in quote-unquote freak shows, but that's kind of a sign of the times.
Yeah, I mean, and in all fairness, even to this day, they do just, I've read about cases where, they... people still go on Oprah, etc., write books, have documentaries, which is our modern equivalent, whether we like it or not, whether we think of ourselves as advanced. Reality television, Oprah, etc., for these cases is our modern day equivalent to freak shows.
Oh gosh, yes.
Which is why another reason why I brought up the Bijani twins, because they were so against this, and they didn't want about. They were intelligent, independent women who it's an easy template to fall into, and I applaud the fact that they were. But it's also wanted to illustrate just how, if you end up in that situation, you're a separate person wanting to make your own mark on the world. How frustrating it is, to the point where you're going to take a non-existent chance just to break free of it.
I mean. Look, we've all been in a relationship where we thought we need to get the hell out of it because it's destructive or negative or harmful, but I don't think any of us would realize what willing lengths some people are. It's a death sentence just to be able to get away from it. So, well, as unfortunately my holiday this month has been postponed, and who knows, maybe we'll do a special episode on our holiday together in Tenerife, and we can talk about everything that makes holidaying with your podcast co-host an adventure, and share via video, via social media. But as we do each and every week, we want to take a look at somewhere in the world that you might not have thought of taking your annual leave to. You may be sitting there thinking, I've signed up to all these newsletters and I get these WhatsApp alerts and I get these emails letting me know this is the best place to go and I can get cheap flights to this place. And by the way, if you're a travel company out there that wants to sponsor this segment of the podcast, feel free to send a message to jsbspod@gmail.com, and Radovan will do a nice live read prior to his Where in the World Are We Going This Week, Beer Doctor?
Well, I mean, in our chat before this episode, I was telling Nick about how I was at work, because, I have to have it because cheapskates.
Patreon.com/JSBSpod.
Yeah. I was at work and I was discussing my holiday plans, and I want to travel around Iran for an extended period of time because I find the place fascinating. Not because I want to see conjoined twins, as it might appear because from the previous segment, although the place we're visiting this episode coincidentally just had their first successful conjoined twin separation surgery. But anyway, okay. I was talking at work about wanting to go to Iran, and the person I was talking to sort of eyes widened, jaw dropped, and was like, what, North Korea too popular for you? I said, as it is, yes. North Korea is becoming increasingly touristy, so I wanted something off the beaten path. That's still steeped in conflict. But what the hell? What? What the
fucking touristy since when?
Now we have 2 tour companies operating in North Korea. Yeah. But what this exchange illustrated is that we all have different preferences about what we want to see in a holiday destination. Now, what I liked about Iran, and my choice in it, is it's not touristy. There's not many people. I mean, they have people in cities, but it's a broad, vast expanse of land, extremely changing landscape. So you get to see a lot in a small area. That's one thing I like about it. The other thing I like about it, even though it's technically a theocracy or a theocratic democracy, it's still a reasonably, since the revolution, and there's been turmoil, but it's been a relatively stable country. Internally. There's obviously all sorts of external pressures. There was the Iraq-Iran war, etc. But internally, it is a fairly stable country. And the third thing, it is reasonably safe and friendly, and that's those 3 things, and it's unusual. Those 4 things make it an attractive destination for me. But I perfectly acknowledge that not everyone is like me.
Yeah.
And that people have different preferences.
Yeah.
And our excursion this week, is for you. Because the place we're going is the very opposite of not having lots of people in it. It is the most densely populated country that is not a city-state in the world. It's as densely populated as Malta, and Malta is a city on an island. The place we're going is the 14th most corrupt country in the world, so definitely not stable. The country hasn't ever, from what I could hear, has never had like a stable government. Since its independence, and several prime ministers have been assassinated. Those who haven't been assassinated were deposed in military coups, and assassinated. And then they had elections, but about roughly every other election ends up with one of the 2 main sides boycotting the election, and then the subsequent government being somewhat illegitimate. So if you're not looking for stability, another tick in your box. And it's also subject to horrible, horrible weather conditions, periodic cyclones, which, due to the country's failed infrastructure, kill tens of thousands of people every year. But none of those are bad things. Well, not bad in comparison with quite possibly the worst thing about this place. It gave us Bob Geldof. Not directly. But it gave rise to the idea of Bob Geldof and Band-Aid and Farm Aid and the USA for Africa and all these sort of preachy, commercialized, pseudo-charity type things, which are mostly just narcissistic exclamations of one's brilliance. Can you guess which country you're talking about?
No, I'm at a complete and utter loss.
All right.
I was trying to go through the alphabet in my head to see.
We're going to Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh, formerly East Bengal, has a colourful history. Bangladesh lies at the delta of the Ganges.
All right, so now I do know a little about Bangladesh. I know that they speak Bengali. They also speak Urdu.
Yes. Used to. Again, it's a complex history. Bangladesh has a Ganges delta, very fertile land.
Yes.
But you also have the cyclones. It's but historically considered the breadbasket of India. You have civilization, signs of sort of people, intelligent civilizations. They're going for 4000 BC. Throughout various, as the entire subcontinent, different empires, different city-states, etc., until the British.
Why is it with every single one of these countries, everything is fine until Britain shows up?
Well, it wasn't exactly fine. It was still lots of...
Let's be honest, Britain fucks it up a bit.
Yes. Islam came in about 12th, 13th century, to the point where Bangladesh is now the third world's largest country in terms of Muslim population. But because of its proximity to India, he still had a Hindi minority. And Bengal, as one thing, Western Bengal, which is today is India, and Eastern Bengal, which is Bangladesh, have been sort of very mixed in this respect. British came and kind of forced the whole thing to become one big thing. So you had Pakistan, India, and within India you had huge divisions, and Bangladesh or Eastern Bengal as one, or Bengal as one thing. Indian partition came. They had the great idea of dividing it across religious lines, where predominantly Hindu India became one thing, and predominantly Muslim Pakistan and Bangladesh became another thing. Now, if you look at the map, you will see Pakistan. If you know India subcontinent, right? That sort of triangular thing there, and then on its northwestern border, you have Pakistan wedged between India and Afghanistan. In one corner of India, I stress. Now, if you travel to the completely other corner of India, the northeastern corner of India, there you have Bangladesh. And the thing about Pakistan and Bangladesh, they were separated by non-Pakistan and Bangladesh. So you had two islands of a country, very different. One, Pakistan, I mean, they were both Muslim, but that doesn't necessarily make it possible to run a country like that, particularly if Bangladesh accounted for 70% of the exports of the country.
Yeah.
And Pakistan took most of the money for its sort of, or was Western Pakistan. Not a good time. Also, democracy quickly turned to somewhat of a military dictatorship. Bangladesh, being underinvested whilst producing most of the money for the country, not very popular, turned to a rather bloody war of independence and the 1971 Bangladeshi genocide, which prompted George Harrison and Ravi Shankar to organize the Concert of Bangladesh, which was the first big benefits concert ever held.
Okay.
Which is where the Bob Geldof thing comes.
Yes.
And also, incidentally, resurrected Bob Dylan's live career, and also was the closest time three of the Beatles ever appeared live on stage, because Ringo Starr famously played Concert for Bangladesh, George Harrison played because he organised it, and John Lennon, who was in the audience, was meant to play as well, but insisted on Yoko Ono performing, which George Harrison said no to. Anyway, that was a little tidbit on the side.
Where was Paul at?
Not giving a shit about Bangladesh, I would have said no that.
Doing something with wings.
Chicken wings. Anyway, yeah, eating chicken wings at home. So, because of this, and because of the genocide, and because of They were killing fields, and Bengali intelligentsia were systematically slaughtered. Public opinion kind of turned against Pakistan. India intervened in favor of Bangladesh, and eventually it ended up with Bangladesh becoming an independent country. And things were all great and rosy ever since, apart from the fact that we already mentioned that they haven't had a very stable government ever since, and Bangladesh is one of the world's poorest countries, most populous, only 60% literacy rates, 14th most corrupt country in the world, and rising, even though constitutionally secular, rising Islamist extremism. There was famously a terrorist attack there last year.
Okay.
So yeah, this is the sort of place where a beautiful country there. But yes, add to the fact that, because of the poor infrastructure, the weather kills a lot of people quite often. And just to give a scale of this corruption, bribery accounts for 3.7% of the GDP.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, what's been going on in Bangladesh? First successful conjoined twin surgery.
Nice.
That's one story.
Okay.
Wheelchair-bound man arrested with 250 gold bars as he tries to enter the country. He ran chip shops in Singapore and didn't fancy paying import tax or tax at all. So he feigned to be ill, put himself in a wheelchair, stuffed 250 gold bars inside a vest, which he put between his legs, which he assumed no one would ever look at, because he's in a wheelchair. Unfortunately, no, people do check those things, and he was discovered. The Bangladeshi Sultan of Sex was detained on blackmail charges. Now, the Sultan of Sex, whose actual name is Sultan, and he called himself Sultan of Sex, is the son of a former Detective Inspector General of Dhaka Police, who, when he died, gave Sultan his multi-story house in Dhaka. Sultan moved in with his wife and 5 children into the top floor and used the rest of the building to make pornography, where he would stream himself and record himself having sex with women. He would advertise himself on the internet. Women would pay to have sex with him. Then he'd wear a superhero costume, record this, stream this, and afterwards he would blackmail the women who were often married he'd had sex with for more money. Now, he's done this for several years. This kind of sums up the country in one single story, because pornography is obviously illegal in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
But because of his father having a prominent position, he was allowed to do this. But I guess he went too far. So yeah, Sultan of Sex arrested. That's him.
I was looking for his photo. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's the fun side of Bangladesh.
The fun side, huh?
The dark side of Bangladesh is government party leader murdered in broad daylight. Another case where political fights turned into violence between 2 rival party youth leagues 5 years ago, where an innocent bystander was beaten to death, and the 4 people who beat him to death were given death sentences. Political activist disappeared whilst walking near his home, found 16 hours later, 120 miles away from where he was meant to be, goes to hospital for a week to recover, tells everyone of this thing. Government responses, he made this up. In total, some 300 political activists have been kidnapped in Bangladesh over the past 3 years, 31 of which have appeared dead. The Home Minister replied, Mr. Khan stated, "Whom will you say disappeared? Many businessmen went into hiding, failing to repay their loans in this country. Some people went missing after developing extramarital relationships." He disparaged the Human Rights Watch report, saying that's propaganda against his country. Nobody has disappeared. These are all people who have disappeared of their own volition.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Fake news.
Nothing. Not fake news. Bangladesh. Take your kids. Come back childless, I guess. I don't know. I don't know whom sort of a holiday in Bangladesh would appeal to. But
okay. So you each week. Now it'll be every other week. Each week, you tell me, why don't we come up with a happy person who has a good life and, does these things. When are we going to a happy place? Is there a happy place on the planet that isn't corrupt and fucking miserable? Is there a place?
We'll just have to wait and see.
Be sure to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/JSBSpod. Follow us on Twitter @JSBSpod. You can watch snippets of this episode on Instagram @JSBSpod. Feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube and Vimeo. Go to jsbspod.com for more information and to get in contact with us. Feel free to send us an email at jsbspod@gmail.com. Give us money. Patreon.com/JSBSpod. So once again, we want to remind all the listeners to share this show with friends. Share it on social media. Also go to the iTunes store and leave an iTunes review. Remember, #iTunes reviews matter. Rate, review, and subscribe. Master Radovan, busy week ahead of you. We'll be down in the JSBS Studios South next week, so hopefully you are prepared with a nice week at work and all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed next week for another crazy adventure. You seem so enthralled.
It's deadline weekend next week, so...
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it'll be 2 weeks from now. We will see what's going on here.
Unless that's another incentive. If you donate lots to Patreon, I don't have to work, and we can do it next week.
Yeah. So be sure to follow us on our social channels, and I will update everyone with when the next episode will drop.
Drop?
Yeah, that's what they call it. Drops. I don't know when it's posted. Why you gotta make fun of my lingo?
What happened to using normal words for the purpose they were intended to do?
Okay. Can I say goodbye to the people?
How are you going to say goodbye? Chicken wings. Because that's how we say goodbye now. Chicken wings. Chicken wings when the next fufu drops.
That's roughly 2 hours of your life you're never gonna get back. This is where you say goodbye.
A man in a trench coat in the dark. A woman's lost a kid sleeping in the park. Rag suits, daggers, Park Avenue. Everybody wants to talk to you about just some BS of there. Just some BS. Just some BS of yours. Just some BS. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS, yeah. Just some BS of ours.